Hey there, everyone. John, you there?
Hey, Michael,
Okay,
can you hear
maybe
me
she's
all
not.
right?
Hey, Celine.
Hi.
All right, so guys, thanks for joining again. John, I sent you some good news we can talk about later. But for all the audience out there, we have Celine Cutter here. Sorry, let me just put on my glasses. I can't see. Okay, here we go. Sorry. Um, We have Celine Cutter here. We have John Rosas, who you guys know. This is our third Zoom. Celine's father is traveling right now. That's Brooks Cutter. They all handled the Maui fires. And so the connection here, John and his family has gone through traumatic fires in Northern California, lost their family house. Celine's uncle and Brooks's brother, and one of my best friends from high school in DC, he lost his house on Chautauqua. So it's all in the family here. And, around the neighborhood and all the group chats in the Palisades, and I'm sure in Altadena, Pasadena, in Santa Clarita, everyone wants to know, okay, well, what action am I going to do after we handle all these insurance claims? Some people are talking class actions. Some people are talking mass actions, mass torts, government immunity. So I brought in the experts, and these are Celine and John. And by the way, Celine and I and Cutter, we just won a big case back in November for spinal fraud, a whistleblower case against Medtronic. But Celine's argued in the Ninth Circuit. She's done great. So she's, I would say, an up and comer, but she's seasoned now. So, John and Celine, introduce yourselves, do your presentations. But I think everyone wants to hear now is, okay, why should I join this law firm, and why is this lawsuit being filed? And then the contingency fee side, like the fee side, someone said they were getting ripped off and they got out of one lawsuit and jumped in another. But where's everything going to end up here? And I'll let you guys take it away.
Appreciate the introduction, Michael. I'm going to let Celine speak to the class action, mass action part of your question there. There's a couple portions that you also raised there, and we also have some substantive information to share with folks here today. For those of you who haven't been with us previously, we're now in our third webinar. We've been coming together the past number of weeks, 3 weeks, to share information with people about recovery and their options as they recover. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about the FEMA recovery process, and Celine's also going to address the substantive question that Michael raised, which is, we're hearing about class actions, we're hearing about mass actions. What's the difference? What is best for me? What do those words mean? And what is the ultimate outcome in the case? On the first question you asked, Michael, about why it is that you want to get involved with getting somebody to represent you and somebody to help you with your recovery process. This is a new thing for everybody that's involved. You didn't choose to get involved in having your home burned down, your neighborhood burned down, your neighbors, your friends, your family, your entire community dislodged from everything that you've ever known. This is something that you need help figuring out how to proceed and to see not just where you are right now, but the top of the mountain and how to get you up past that and to the other side to recovery. And just like if you have if you have an injury, you go see a medical professional. If you have a legal harm, you see a legal professional. And so first, I'll present a little bit of information here about the immediate legal issues that folks are dealing with as it relates to FEMA. And then I'll turn it over to Celine to talk about kind of the more specific details of the class actions and the cases that are coming together now to hold folks responsible, the folks responsible for causing the fire accountable for what they have done. And so to help present this information, I've got a PowerPoint here. All right. And so the topics we're talking about here today are your reentry onto your property, recovery from the fire, and then Celine will speak to responsibility, holding those accountable who are responsible for causing the fire. The contact information for my law firm is here. You can email us wildfire@cutterlaw.com. You can call 888-825-3333 and ask to speak with one of the team members on the wildfire recovery team. And we will be able to get you connected with somebody to help you figure out your legal rights quickly. So right now we're in phase one of the recovery. This is where FEMA and the California Department of Toxic Substances is moving into the properties and removing the toxic substances, things like batteries, cleaners, and the like from your property. You do not need to sign up for phase one of the recovery. That's automatically being done as we speak. And the fact that you do not need to sign up is important here as we roll in and we start talking about phase number two. So phase one, this is FEMA overseeing the EPA, California Department of Toxic Substances, getting in and cleaning up the household hazard waste, the batteries, all those things that contaminate the soil and your property. Phase number two, that's the next phase. And this is going to be an opt-in, opt-out process. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a minute. But this is where the United States Army Corps of Engineers comes in and does the larger debris removal process. And that is the opt-in or opt-out process. The deadline that you're going to want to write down is March 31, 2025. So you got a couple of months here, 3 months to decide, am I going to opt into this process or am I going to opt out of the process? You can go to recovery.lacounty.gov for the form that allows you to opt in or opt out. This website and the form also have a lot of the information that we're going to talk about in a little bit more detail here today. There at the website for you to take a look at your leisure and at your pace. The form that's at the website is called a right of entry form. Now, what that is that is you as the property owner saying to the Corps of Engineers, you may enter my property and you may remove the debris that is there. Part of this process is if you've got insurance, you are assigning to FEMA the right to recover only that part of the insurance that covers the debris removal on your property. It doesn't mean that you're assigning your personal property. It doesn't mean you're assigning the funds that you're going to need in order to rebuild your home. You are only assigning that specific portion of your insurance policy where your insurance company is agreeing to pay for removal of debris from your property.
And John, if I may for a second here, sorry, I'm just trying to, I rushed in here. I think my video is messed up. Can you guys see me clearly? Or is it all?
You got a little bit of pixelation going on, but I can see you more or less.
Okay, maybe it's this the connection. All right, so real quick, let me just back up here because for a lot of people who are listening right now or who are watching, I went to our properties yesterday. And, it's pretty scary. There's a lot of ash, and this is part of phase one. I went in there with my car. I had a mask on, didn't use the AC. The windows were up. I literally saw people with no masks, government workers, in residents. And, I saw people wearing shorts. I'm like, are these people crazy? It's still so toxic right now. So I advise, from what I saw yesterday, basically, unless your house is standing, everything is ash. Our house is completely ash. So I just want to throw that out there regarding phase one. And another thing to interject here is for people to understand that, while FEMA is the government, the federal government, they actually subcontract out to private contractors. So there's been a lot of debate, John, if you want to address this, on the different chats of people using a private contractor as opposed to FEMA. Some people don't trust FEMA. They think they're just going to come and bulldoze. But FEMA is it's not the government. They're subcontracting out. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a fair point, Michael. And that's something we touched on the last two sessions is that FEMA acts as the overarching, the Army Corps of Engineers acts as the overarching governmental entity that comes in, contracts with private companies, and oversees the execution of the contracts by those private companies. It will be private contractors that come in and do this work. It's just simply too large a project for any governmental entity to do. Um, so you will see a number of contractors coming in. There'll be private bulldozers. There'll be private dump trucks hauling off all of the debris. As far as the other point you raised, Michael, about people going in during this phase one part of the process, and again, phase one is there's been clearance of the immediate toxics, the stuff that's under the sink, the batteries. You're now going in and you're able to sift the debris of your home. There's really no oversight that is exercised over respirators and things like that. People are being trusted to go in and mind their own health. And yeah, you're right. There are people that go in without respirators. It's not recommended. You want to wear a full body suit so you don't take home any asbestos or any other harmful toxic substances that you may come across as you sift through your home. And Michael, you've raised a number of times that many of the homes are older. They were constructed with asbestos-containing products, and we know that asbestos is harmful, and you can bring that stuff home with you, and you don't want to multiply the harm that you're exposed to by not taking the appropriate precautions for yourself.
Yeah, and one final word for you all move on here is because the EPA told me or the FEMA told me to tell everyone this to get the word out that if you have a power wall or if you had a Tesla, to call the EPA and let them know which side of the property it's on, because those as they said, quote unquote, they could be potential bombs. And literally, I kid you not, the one lady at the Disaster Recovery Center on Sunday said, if you have a power wall or a Tesla and you hear sizzling going on and cracking, they said run. And I'm not joking. They said run. So that's how dangerous it can be. So, okay, I'll shut my mouth now and let you
Would that
both.
be kind of any big solar battery that people might have? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and Michael, I'm glad you raised that as well, because that is also something that is a newer issue and a larger issue since the last round of wildfires that the Army Corps of Engineers saw cleanup on. While there were solar panels and batteries in Northern California and in Maui, much less prevalent than they are today, 2024, so 2025 rather. So they're learning how to deal with that, and the best we can do is give people a heads up that even though you've been cleared to go in there, it's still a dangerous place. The Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, nobody knows exactly where all of these batteries are, and so you got to raise a flag and help them keep everybody safe as they're in there. So to roll on with what we're talking about here, the right of entry form, one of the important things that's in there, and this is something that is important for you as the landowner and knowing what is the full extent of my exposure financially and otherwise for allowing the Army Corps of Engineers and its contractors to go onto my property. If I decide to opt into this process, the form spells out very clearly that you're not responsible for any further wildfire generated debris, hazard tree removal, or costs incurred by the government. In other words, you don't have to worry that by signing on the dotted line and opting into the debris removal process, that you're going to get another hidden cost bill down the road to just multiply the disaster that you've been subjected to. All right. So the next question is, well, what does phase two removal look like? What does that mean? What that means for you is that it is removal of almost everything that's above the foundation at your home. If there are fire damaged trees and those trees expose the Army Corps workers to a hazard, they'll cut the trees and they'll take them. They won't remove the stumps. That will be left. That will be something that you will need to deal with if the trees are fire damaged or looking like they're going to die. But they will take the top of the tree with them. They will leave driveways. They will leave patios typically if they can remove the debris that's above it without damaging those. If they can remove the debris from the home without damaging those structures, they will remove those. But you notice here that what I say is that they will remove everything above the foundation. Quick point that I want to make sure I reach. Debris removal will include the vehicles on your property. If you have auto insurance, there may be some coverage for it. If not, you can still have the burned out vehicles on your property removed. That will be taken care of by the Corps of Engineers. You will want to talk to your insurance company though, and make sure you let them know, hey, I'm opting in. The debris removal process will include a removal of the vehicles on my property. I filled out that portion of the form where it says, what are the vehicles? Insurance company, if you need something to validate the loss to pay me for that vehicle, insurance company, you need to tell me now so that that can be handled, right? You don't want to be in a place where you've opted into the removal, or even you've opted out and had your own contractors remove the debris from the vehicle, but the insurance company says, hey, we didn't have a chance to inspect, so we're not going to pay you for that. So as a heads up, make sure you let your insurance company know. One of the choices that you will have to make with the form is, what am I going to do with the foundation on my home? Michael, you raised this issue during the first session where we got together. What about the foundation? As a general matter, contractors are not going to put a rebuilt home on top of a foundation where there was significant burn damage. Meaning if your home burnt out, you're going to have a hard time finding a contractor that will put a replacement home on top of that foundation. But if you are wanting to investigate the issue and talk to contractors and keep your foundation because, hey, I don't have enough money to rebuild my home, I'm going to see if I can save some money by keeping the foundation. That's something that you want to start on now. You want to get a contractor, if you're planning on keeping the foundation, to tell you that they will in fact build a home on top of that foundation, and put that in black and white in a contract so that you can rely on it as you get down the road. So that is kind of the rough outline of what's going on right now with the FEMA recovery process. We are in that phase one where they're cleaning out the immediate hazards. You will not get into phase two, and you will not get past phase two until you have either opted in or opted out. And remember, the deadline for that, as you're going through this, if you have questions, you can reach out to us at 888-825-3333. My name is John Rusas. You can email us also. And if you want to reach out to Celine after you've heard from her and ask her some follow-up questions, you can reach out to her also. Same phone number, wildfire@cutterlaw.com. And with that,
John, just before you move on, I have a question for you. So you bring up the foundation issue. A lot of us, like us, actually have retaining walls in the backyard. Because some of us live in the canyon and on the hillside, there are a lot of retaining walls in the Palisades. How does that fit into things right there?
Michael, that's actually a different situation, right? I mean, obviously you're going to need to evaluate the retaining wall, and is it structurally sound, and is it going to keep your property safe from the upslope hill? But I've seen a lot of clients opt to keep their retaining walls. because it's not the same structural load, right? You're going to want to have a contractor evaluate it, but it's not the same type of load. Certainly, if your retaining walls were subjected to the high heat, they're still subject to the same problems with with the removal of the water from the concrete and damaging thereby the strength of the concrete in those walls. So that will be an issue you'll have to look at. But it's much less pressing than putting the load of a home on top of it.
Got it. Thank you.
So I'll,
Okay.
jump in and talk about our class action versus mass tort question that's come up. So when we're talking about a wildfire situation, we treat this as a mass tort case. The term class action is probably a lot more familiar to folks, but a class action refers to a situation where everybody maybe had the same financial problem, where one guy looked at his Ticketmaster receipt and said, "Oh, what's this charge for $7? That wasn't part of it." And it turns out everybody gets charged the same processing fee. So usually a class action is a situation like that where everybody across the board would have had the same little financial ripoff. And so one person is able to bring the lawsuit on behalf of everybody because everybody had the same problem. In a wildfire situation like this, it's a different type of case. We call it a mass tort. And that's because everyone's home is different. Everyone's loss is different. So it's not a situation where one person can stand up in court and speak for everybody, because everyone has experienced a different situation and will have different costs and different issues to face going forward. So we're looking at this as a mass tort action. And what that means for you is that we treat your case individually. So just because it's a mass or large group, you're not going to be just one number on a list in a long line of cases. We take a personal approach to everyone's case and we get to know your situation. So that's the big distinction. And, the cases will be eventually all grouped together. So that's what makes it a mass action, when a lot of different people have their own cases and they all get brought together in front of one judge, basically for organization purposes. But it's not a situation where one person would be speaking up as the representative on behalf of everyone. That's the basic difference.
And Celine, in doing that, in terms of judicial efficiency, is there a benefit of filing first and then have everyone coming after you? Or does it all go into the same pot, and how is that pot in the end distributed?
Yeah, so I think this is not a situation where there's a race to the courthouse. Ultimately, I think everybody will be brought together in front of one judge, yes, for efficiency purposes, and there will likely be a filing deadline set eventually of when this is the time cutoff when you've got to bring your case in court. But there's no cutoff as of right now, especially with regard to the Palisades fire, because we're still looking into, I think the investigation is still ongoing as to whether there's responsibility on behalf of, a utility company. With the Eaton fire, there's looking like there's pretty good evidence that Edison was mismanaging the power lines at that time. So the clock is maybe starting to tick for that fire more specifically. And so people should reach out, if they're interested in pursuing those claims with a little more urgency, but any deadlines would not be for still a few more months.
Yeah, and Michael, one of the things that that happens behind the scenes and that folks don't see right now is that the attorneys that represent people, the attorneys that routinely represent people like you who have been burned out, we cooperate and coordinate behind the scenes, right? We're taking on Southern California Edison, we're taking on DWP, we're taking on large entities. We're taking on the state of California, the city of Los Angeles County. We band together, we share resources, we share information, And that is how we get the best result for people. So one of the big things isn't necessarily who's running the most ads right now, who's run down to the courthouse and filed the first lawsuit, who gets to waive the lawsuit, on the nightly news and say, hey, I'm the guy who's filing lawsuits. It's the immediate part of the process, right? It's the immediate of, if I call this law firm, who's answering the phone? Is it an attorney? Is it a receptionist? Can I get to my attorney? Can I get somebody to help me with the immediate stuff that I've got going on right now? And, if you can't talk to the attorney, if you can't set an appointment with the attorney, if you can't get your current legal questions answered, then maybe that's not the best arrangement for you, especially since behind the scenes, we're already all cooperating and working towards the same goal of making the best recovery and the strongest case against those responsible for causing these fires, and also exacerbating how bad the consequences of these fires are.
And so Celine and John, the first lawsuit that was filed was, I believe, an inverse condemnation lawsuit. Can you explain to the audience exactly what that is?
Sure, Michael, what that means is anytime the government takes your property, it must pay fair compensation for that. And that's something that is, a bedrock principle in our federal constitution, as well as in the state of California constitution. And it's also in California statutes. And so what that means is that, if it's Southern California Edison or whatever other entity it is, and Southern California Edison is not a governmental entity, but under the law, it's treated as if it's the government for various reasons that are beyond what we need to discuss here today. And so what that means is they have to pay you fair compensation for destroying your property. They don't just get to destroy it and walk away. They also have to pay a portion of your attorney's fees for the cost of getting you your compensation, right? And so this is one way that we have to hold the government and any governmental entities or SCE accountable for what they have done.
And for the audience here, so are the attorney's fees, by the way, are those statutory fees or do those come out of any settlement?
So two parts to your answer, Michael. First, the attorney's fees that any individual agrees to with their attorney, those are not set by law. Those are set between the attorney and the individual client. On an inverse condemnation, the right to recover your attorney's fees from the governmental entity, and if SCE is responsible from SCE, that is set by law. So short answer, you and your attorney agree on your attorney fee, and the law allows you to recover your attorney fee from those responsible if it's a governmental entity.
Okay. And let me just kind of break this down because, more on the whistleblower side here for the audience. For example, if Celine or Cutter Law and I had a settlement for a whistleblower case, there's statutory fees involved. And let's say the case settled for $1 and we had 50 cents in attorney's fees. Under the statute, that 50 cents wouldn't be deducted from that dollar. So from your client share, the defendant has to pay that 50 cents. So there's different ways here in terms of the way the law works. So I think people wanted to know that. The big question here too for both of you. Okay, so law firm A says that they're filing this mass tort and they're taking 35% contingency, meaning the client gets 65%, the law firm gets 35%. But law firm B over here says, you know what? We don't go that high. We give the client 75% and we take 25% of any settlement or judgment. How does that, what's the norm for people so they know? Is there like a standard there?
I hate to give you a wishy-washy answer, Michael, but it really depends. You have to be careful because sometimes you get what you pay for. There are a lot of law firms that are coming into the LA area to represent people that are spending a lot of money on marketing and scooping up clients that have never done this work before. Everybody and their mother who did estate law before all of a sudden is now putting up a webpage that says that we're the fire lawyers. And they're just scooping up people. Sometimes what they do is they refer them to other law firms. They don't actually do any work. They just grab you and pass you off like you're a commodity, a tomato to be passed off to some other law firm to do your work. So you're going to want to connect with a law firm that's reputable, that somebody and trust has worked with in the past, a law firm that has a history of working with people that are affected by wildfires. One of the biggest questions you're going to want to ask is, above and beyond the, have you worked these cases before, is what else, what else is our relationship? Am I going to be able to pick up the phone and get a hold of an attorney to get information about all of the legal steps between here and the end of the case? Or is this purely you're going after those responsible and I get no advice from you in the meantime, right? You want to know exactly what it is that the firm's going to do, and all of that will be spelled out for you in the retainer agreement. One of the other things you also want to be really careful about is some law firms, what they do is they charge you a lower contingency fee, but they apply it to anything and everything that you get in compensation. So in other words, if they help you at all with your insurance, well, they get some of that. If they help you with your personal property coverage, they take some of that. That's not the way that we operate. We limit our contingency fee exclusively to anything that we help you get from those responsible for causing the fire or the magnitude of the fire. So in other words, if Southern California Edison ultimately is responsible in Eaton and we get you a recovery there, our contingency fee applies to that. We get compensated from that. Now, if Southern California Edison, it turns out it's not responsible, and we make no recovery, we don't then turn around and give you the bill and say, well, I wish it had worked out better. Sorry for the fire. Now here's my bill and pay me. We do not do that. If we do not make a recovery, whether it's Palisades, Eaton, or any of the other fires, we eat that loss.
Right.
We had a good question about, can you participate in multiple lawsuits? The simple answer is no. If you've got claims arising from the fire, you have to bring them all together in one case. That's just the general rule in the courts. So you can bring an inverse condemnation and a negligence claim together, as long as it's all coming out of the same situation. But you've got to do it as one case.
So basically you can't double up or triple up on all the various law firms.
No, at some point, one of those cases will be dismissed for you.
Got it. And so here's another question, because everyone, for the Palisades fire, some people say it could have been a homeless person. Some people say that it was from a smoldering fire from the New Year's Eve fireworks. But is this a possibility out there where maybe it was from the New Year's Eve fire, maybe it was an unhoused, excuse my language, unhoused person who lit that fire. But let's say and that's how the fire originally started. But as the fire grew and the wind grew, is it possible that maybe down the canyon, the wind knocked over a power line and that started a new fire? And that caused these houses to be damaged. And so those people then could go after the utility companies for that portion of the fire.
Yeah, that's entirely possible, Michael. If a utility company caused or contributed to the fire, then it will be held responsible for it, right? And if, kind of going back, everybody's seen in the newspaper about how there was no water pressure. If the decisions that landed us in that place were irresponsible, then there is a path to hold those responsible for making those irresponsible decisions accountable for what they did, right? So, part of what I'm reluctant to do at this point, kind of given how the information ebbs and flows, and a story that's taken as gospel one day, the next day is reversed. Like the fire started in a backyard by accident. Well, and the next day they took that back. I don't want to give people bad information and kind of perpetuate this bad information on bad information thing. But kind of the bottom line that holds true is the law does not allow harm to go without just compensation.
Yeah. And I just bring up those examples because a lot of people, whether, lost their house, or what about, actually people who lost their businesses, right? There were some people in Marquez, they didn't own the land, but they owned the businesses. They lost tons of inventory. Or some people who were renting and their apartment building is burned down. They lost everything. I mean, what kind of lawsuits, where do they fit in with this? Can they do a mass tort as well?
Yeah, the name mass tort really just refers to the fact that there were so many people who were harmed by the same bad actor or bad actors, or the same set of circumstances, right? You remain an individual. Each one of you will get a retainer agreement from my law firm. Each one of you will be an individual client. Your case will be your facts. What ultimately caused your harm is the same as the guy next door, as the guy who lost the business, as the renter. But your loss is different than the renter, than the business, than everybody else. So you will remain an individual. You will be compensated and treated based on what you individually are going through. You will just be joined together with other people who were harmed because of the same careless conduct by those responsible for causing or contributing to the magnitude of this loss.
Okay. And then in your experience from the Maui fires, and I don't know if there's questions because I don't have my glasses on right now, Celine. So if they are, if you want to read them, what's the time frame here? Let's say tomorrow they find out what the cause of the fire is, right, or was, and they see, okay, well, there's these defendants, okay. So let's say, just say hypothetical, tomorrow we know who the defendants are. What's the path, the journey along with the lawsuits? How many years are we talking?
So it has varied across fires, but Maui fire, Michael, I think is a very good example there. In Maui, the plaintiffs' attorneys banded together, meaning the people that represented individuals like you. We worked together collaboratively, and there was a tremendous amount of political pressure brought to bear by the federal government, by the governor, and by the mayor to force those who were responsible for causing the fire. In Maui, that was a utility, and also a tremendously huge property owner. They forced them to come to the table. And within 1 year, we had a structure put together for compensating people who were burned out. Now we're just beyond a year. There was a big step day before yesterday where we've reached an agreement about how we're going to get money to people. And probably by this summer, we're going to be able to start getting claims paid to people who were burned out. And that is on a fast track. Then you've got like what happened to my family up in Northern California in Santa Rosa, where PG&E was bankrupted. The case went into bankruptcy, and it's now 7, almost 8 years down the road, and we're still not fully concluded with the case. My expectation is that this is going to be more a Maui fire model, where responsibility is addressed more along the lines of a Maui fire timeline than, the 8 to 10 years of bankruptcy court.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. I think one of the biggest things going for us, for the LA people, is that, the Angelinos here, is that we have the Olympics coming in 2028. And, there's a lot of pressure to have this all kind of cleaned up and rebuilt by then, because there's already a housing shortage issue here in Los Angeles. and so many people have been displaced. And, we're living in a marina, people are living in Venice. These are Airbnbs, hotels, and houses that need to be available for when the world comes to LA in 3 years. So hopefully we will get fast track like Maui, but no promises. Celine, any questions?
Yes, so one person asked, what is the process for engaging a lawyer?
So with my law firm, probably the easiest way is for you to reach out to us by email. And again, that email is wildfire, WILDFIRE, at cutterlaw.com, CUTTERLAW.com. You can also call us at 888-825-3333. First step in the process is you'll talk to one of my staff members who will get basic information from you. Where was your property? What happened? What's your insurance picture? And then they'll connect you with me or one of the other attorneys to address any specific legal questions you've got. Next kind of step in the process is the retainer agreement, and that's the contract that sets out exactly what it is that the law firm does for you. And again, that's very important for you because that gives you protection, right? That puts it in black and white. This is what you agreed that you're going to do. This is how much you agreed that you're going to get paid. And this is where it says right there in black and white, we do not touch your insurance money. And whether you sign up with us or another law firm, make sure you've got that protection for yourself. You've got that retainer agreement that says, we don't touch your insurance money. That's your money. You paid for it. You're entitled to it. So that's what the retainer process looks like, Celine.
And what's the importance of people when they're dealing with their insurance companies right now? What's the importance of them documenting how they're being treated in terms of down the road if they have to go after, let's say, their agent or their insurance company in terms of bad faith and misrepresentation? If you can kind of go into how that helps with punitive damages and what those are.
So right now, you're in this kind of phase where you've got all kinds of information coming at you from all angles, right? And you're trying to have a clear conversation with your insurance company about what is my coverage? What will you pay for? And it's really important that, whatever conversations you have, whether, it's on the phone or in person, that after you hang up, that you send an email to your adjuster and you confirm, here's what we talked about. Here's what you told me. Let me know if that's not right. And pardon me. And the reason for that is a couplefold. One is kind of the fog of war, right? Everything that's going on with you right now, if you put it down in black and white, if you put it in that email, when you get 4, 5, 6 months on down the road, you won't have any problem confirming exactly what it is you discussed, what it was they promised you, and what it is they said that they were going to do and when they said they were going to do it. Right. So it avoids that memory issue of anybody forgetting. And that's on both sides of the equation. That's both you, who's dealing with so much right now and the trauma that goes with it, and also the insurance company, right? Because sometimes what happens is the insurance company tells you one thing and then does another. And when the time has come to pay and honor that obligation they told you they would honor on the phone, they say, we never said that. You misunderstood what we were saying. That's not the way the policy works. And if you've got that email to point to and say, no, here it is. Here's the date. Here's the email. This is what we agreed to. It's much, much easier for you to get fair treatment. And then if the insurance company decides, it doesn't matter, you may have put that down, but that's not what we're going to do because we're big bad insurance company and we have a lot of money and you're burned out and you've got none, then that's where your attorneys can use the writings, the emails, the confirmation that you created after those conversations to force them to stand behind their promises. It's much easier if you've got he said insurance company lied kind of case because they're not standing behind themselves versus a he said, she said, where the insurance company says, no, you just got it wrong. You misunderstood what I was saying, and you've got nothing to document the promise they made. So always after every conversation, it may feel daunting, but it pays off a millionfold in any dealings down the road.
And how does that also go to, like, say you have to go to trial, right, to get your money? How does that deal with punitive damages, and what are punitive damages for people?
So if you end up having to go to trial against the insurance company, right, to force it to stand behind a promise that you made, if they acted intentionally or recklessly or with malice, then you can get what's called punitive damages. And punitive damages are to punish an insurance company when they do things like this, right? They tell you one thing and then they do another. They undertake an obligation and that it's a lie. And then they stand behind their lie rather than standing behind their promise. So, if that's the kind of conduct that they're involved in, then a jury of your peers, meaning other people who have been through this, can assess damages, punishing the insurance company for lying, for acting in that way. And it's much easier for people looking at a situation to decide who's right, who's wrong, who's lying, and who's not, if it's all in black and white. Celine, do we have any other questions coming in?
Yes, we have a question about how, attorney's fees, if they're awarded, would stack on to a contingency fee.
That's a really good question. And that's one of those ones where the devil's in the detail. Take a look at your retainer agreement. That should be spelled out in the retainer agreement. Sometimes retainer agreements say, I, attorney, take both, whatever attorney's fees are awarded, if we win an inverse condemnation, plus a contingency fee on anything I get. And sometimes they're applied to subtract and, so that you get a credit, right? If you've got a contingency fee of 30%, that would, to use a number, be $3 from your $10 recovery, and you get $3 for your inverse condemnation claim. Well, then that $3 takes care of your $3 contingency fee. So you don't have to pay out of the total recovery that you make.
Then we did have a question about how inverse condemnation works. This one person asked, does that mean then the government owns your property?
No. Inverse condemnation is exactly about the idea that the government does not own your property. It doesn't get to destroy your house and walk away without paying for what it's done. It doesn't, the property they took is your home. The property they took is your personal property. The property they took is your car. They now need to pay you for that. It does not mean that they own your lot. It does not mean that they own anything else that you've got. It just means that that property that they took, they must reimburse you for it at fair value, not at some made up number that they want to throw at you.
This is a good question right here. And sorry, I have my outdoor glasses on because all my other ones burn. The cause is one issue, but can't the response to the fire also be a cause for something? Meaning that there was no water when we turned it on very early. Firefighters on the scene said they couldn't do anything without the water, etc.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything that causes or contributes to the magnitude of your harm is something that you can be compensated for.
And so in that situation there where there was no water, where would you look to? Someone like LADWP, the community council, the city, the fire department? Is that part of the investigation?
That is exactly what the investigation is, Michael, is who did what, when, and why. What information did they have when they made the decisions that they did? did they actually make a decision? That's kind of one of the biggest questions is, did somebody actually make a decision here? Did somebody decide to do what they did with the water, or was that purely ineptitude? You know, people very often what we find in cases dealing with the government is that you've got all of these governmental entities, you know, and one doesn't know what the next is doing. They don't communicate with each other, and you, the individual, gets caught in between. And that's very often where the government is responsible for causing harm like this, is not having communication between entities that are responsible for things like making sure there's water available, you know, during a wind event that we knew was going to come, and it's such a foreseeable event that it actually has a name, right? They call it the Santa Anas for a reason. And it's not because this is the first time they've blown through there.
And what about, if we answer this next question here, what about this scenario where when the initial beginning of the fire, people saw it, they called 911, and the 911 was like, sorry, there's nothing we can do right now. So how does going after, let's say 911, I mean, where does that fall, and under what category would 911 be a defendant?
So when you file a lawsuit against the government, you're filing a lawsuit against the people who write the laws. You know, it ends up being a situation where very often they wrote a law that says you cannot hold 911 responsible under these circumstances. And you know, within that, there are loopholes that, but if it's one of these circumstances, you can hold 911 accountable. So that's why the investigation phase of this is so important, is you're now dealing with a situation where you are fighting against the guys that wrote the laws, and you are trying to see, is it one of those circumstances that they protected themselves from lawsuit, or is this one of those circumstances where they did not, right? Is this government entity A and B didn't talk to each other, and therefore I can be compensated, or is this a situation where I cannot?
I think this last question is asking about, you know, people with different amounts of insurance coverage, you know, if they would end up with the same maybe result in a mass action like this. And everybody is going to prove up their own loss. So it's not a question of, you know, you have $1 million in insurance and someone else has 2 million and we're going to even it all out. That's not the purpose. The purpose is for every individual to be compensated for what they lost, and that's different amounts for everybody.
Yeah, so I think it's what everyone has to be made whole, so to speak, right? And to make someone whole, as you said, there's different amounts. It could be, you know, 1 million for one person, 200,000 for another person, in that fashion. And on that topic there, Celine and John, of making people whole, what is it that enables, you know, we've talked about this before about the third party liability, but what about for people who did not have fire insurance, and they lost their house? How does that, because I know there's a lot of cases like that where they got, say, dropped by State Farm and they didn't have time to pick up fire insurance, or the time had lapsed and now they're out there in the wind. They may have a policy like a hazard insurance policy, but they don't have fire insurance. How can you make them whole?
The only option there, Michael, if you've got no insurance, is the people that ultimately are responsible for causing or contributing to the size of this disaster, right? You know, if we're talking about SCE, DWP, whatever it may be, that is what you're talking about, right? You know, last week we talked a little bit about government programs that exist, FEMA, the funds that exist with FEMA, the Small Business Administration. And you know, that we recorded that session, and it's at my law firm's website. So if you go to cutterlaw.com and you go to the fire page, you'll see there the recording from last week, where we talked about FEMA and the funds that are available for you if you're one of these people who unfortunately had no insurance at all. There are some funds available for your immediate needs. Watch that video. But long term, you're talking about exclusively those responsible for causing or contributing to the scope of this disaster.
That's a good point. For those, I went with my wife on Sunday to the Disaster Recovery Center in West LA, the Pavilion, West LA Pavilion. Saw some neighbors there, and they were really, really helpful. So if you haven't done that yet, I suggest you go. It's a really easy process. Everyone wants to help you out there. And a lot of the questions that people are asking on these group chats, like, how do I get on my property and look through my stuff? Well, there's vendors there like Samaritan Purse, where you can sign up. They'll meet you at the property. They'll give you protective gear. You make an appointment, and they'll help walk through everything with you. There's also, like you said before, the SBA. They have loans. There's FEMA there. There's Catholic ministries, I believe, or Catholic churches. So there's the Red Cross is also there. But anything that you lost, like marriage certificates, birth certificates, wedding certificates, you can get it there. And it's in passports. It's a pretty easy and not a painful process whatsoever. It's not like going to the DMV. Let's put it that way.
That sounds, Michael, like they've done a much better job with you guys than they have historically, right? The FEMA and the other disaster relief agencies have really stepped up their game since the earlier fires. I'm really glad to hear that that's the case here.
Yeah, and one last thing for people out there, there's also the California Franchise Tax Board, and now they're saying they're allowing people to write this off for 2024 taxes, and then maybe count it out over 20 years as well. So there's different options. I would highly recommend you go. There's also unemployment is there. You can file for unemployment there if you lost your job because of this. So there's so many different vendors there that are just so helpful. I think there's another question that came in.
Yeah, the question is, if your insurance fully covers to rebuild your home, contents, and ALE, then are there no damages owed from the responsible party?
Yeah, I think that is one of the harms that you're going to come to really understand and become familiar with over the long term. And what I mean by that is you are going to see a lot of people not come back after the fire. The reality of the situation is that most people don't have enough to rebuild. Their job goes away. They don't have enough to rebuild. They decide to move. They go to another part of the state, another city. They leave the state entirely. So you're going to lose significant parts of your community, friendships that you've had all your life. You're going to lose those. What you're going to be going through personally over the next number of months is painful. It's frustrating. What you're going to see your children going through if you've got children. I remember my kids for more than a year. Running from the fire was part of their play. It was something that they talked about every night before they went to sleep. There's a scar. Make no mistake about it. There's a scar, and a deep one, from this fire. And right now you're in survival mode, and you're probably not feeling the pain from that scar the same way that you will, but you will continue to deal with a scar for many years. A lot of people have psychological trauma, from the escape. If you escaped and you were in fear of your life as you were escaping, that will be with you. That may be with you for the rest of your life. I know a lot of people who, now almost a decade after the fire, still have nightmares from what they went through from the fire. So even, setting aside the property stuff, the question of replacing property, you as a human being are going to be dealing with a lot for many years to come. And that is something that we do a particularly good job with getting you fair compensation for as part of a lawsuit. That is not a small thing. It's an invisible harm. It is not visible. You can't see it. You can't put your hand on it, but it is a tremendous harm that you deserve fair treatment for.
That's a good point here, before we answer the next question. There's also, some vendors there for emotional support at the Disaster Recovery Center. Things that you can do in terms of apps and everything there. So that's available there as well. It's not just financial, there's also emotional support as well.
Yeah.
So just to be clear, these cases are not just about your property loss. They will also include those personal harms to you for emotional distress or, for folks who may have been injured, that would all be included.
And before we answer this next question here, if there was one, when you talk about emotional distress here, Celine, what exactly is that? How do you prove that? If I say, okay, the fires happen, I've had a headache for 6 months, right? Insurance company or one of the defendants says, yeah, we don't believe you. Show us. So when people want to claim for emotional distress, how do you go about doing that and documenting that?
Easiest answer, Michael, if you're talking about just the emotional distress part of it, is talk to anybody who has been through what you guys are dealing with right now. You can immediately tell the difference between someone who's making it up and someone who's really been through it. There's no doubt about it. The other
Right.
thing you put your finger on is, medical harm, right? I've got headaches. The number of physical ailments that people develop after being exposed to a fire, they are many, and defining them is very difficult. Go to the doctor, get care, get help, ask the medical professionals for help. Over in Maui, there are a large number of studies that are first of their kind studies investigating the links between the number of chemicals that people were exposed to in the air and the soil all around from the fire, and the health consequences that they're suffering. The sheer emotional weight of losing everything that you've worked for all of your life, it crushes a lot of people's immune systems. And it may sound hinky, and some people may say, oh, yeah, whatever, John, show me the medical journal that says that. But I can tell you this, I've helped hundreds of people who have gone through that feeling. And unless they're all faking it, it's a real coincidence. No, it's very real. The emotional weight of what you're dealing with on its own can bring out bodily symptoms. Go get help. Go get help from your doctors, pulmonologists, whoever it is. Go in and get it checked out. Let them help you find your way forward. And don't forget the spiritual help, the counselors, clergy, friends, support groups, all that stuff is a tremendous help.
And that's used down the road for monetary damages for the survivors to get compensated, correct? Meaning that, hey, I went to these doctors, here's the proof. I really do have I had emotional distress, still do, as opposed to saying, yeah, I took 2 Tylenol a day and that's how I dealt with it.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Michael. Yeah, in part, you're doing it because in large part, I would say you're doing it. You're taking care of yourself because you got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of your health. And in part, while you're taking care of your health, your doctor is creating a record. There's a chart that says, Michael came in a couple days after the fire, a couple weeks after the fire, a month after the fire, when he was finally able to, and was reporting these symptoms, right? That now does become a part of the legal case. And it's very helpful. Just like we were talking about earlier with the insurance company, if it's written down, if it's in black and white, it makes it a lot easier as we get down the road to make sure that you're treated fairly.
Yeah, and I think for people out there who are watching, the health issues is a big concern. I've interviewed Joe Torrillo, who's a former lieutenant for the New York City Fire Department in 9/11. He now was, he was at ground zero, and he now is suffering from dementia. So they found out later on that is the inhalation and the respiratory issues he had with all that toxic, the asbestos in the initial cloud and after, people now are getting dementia from it. So it's important to go to the physician and start to document this path here. So later on that you can be taken care of.
That's very true, Michael. And unfortunately, events like 9/11 and the Maui fire uh, lead to new medical discoveries and new understandings of how exposure to various chemicals cause harm. Sometimes we think we're a little bit more medically advanced than we actually are, and that, we know all links between exposures and harms. But unfortunately, it's events like this where you have just mass exposure to the number of chemicals and the level of exposure to these chemicals, where science and medicine really discovers and establishes those links. So do take care of yourself. Go in, get that help.
Yeah. I think there's another question here.
The question is, what about insurance brokers' liability?
So that's a very real part of what we're dealing with for a lot of people. A lot of people are now learning that the insurance they thought they were getting is not the insurance that they've got, or that somebody messed up and didn't place the insurance that they were supposed to. And that's one of those things where if that's what you're running into, you need to reach out and get legal help, right? We'll gather the emails, we'll gather whatever else it is that we've got, and see if this is something where you can be helped. If you were buying an insurance product and you didn't get what you paid for, then the people who messed up need to be held accountable. It's not supposed to be dropping on you.
And is there a difference between an insurance agent and an insurance broker?
There is, Michael, but first of all, what qualifies you as an agent, what qualifies you as a broker, even if the name agent or broker is used, and even if there was a case that just came out, a guy had State Farm flags in his office, and the court said, no, he wasn't a State Farm agent, or he wasn't acting for State Farm when he did that stupid thing that he did that really messed you up. So that's something where it's really facts and circumstances intense inquiry. It's something where you want to get in with an attorney, even if the guy says I'm an agent or a broker, and let the attorney get in and figure out the facts of the circumstances, because they may not be what they call themselves. And the difference between an agent and a broker, Michael, the idea is the extent of responsibility that the insurance company that they place you with accepts for dealing with those people. So if you're running into a situation, don't hit your head against the wall. Don't let somebody tell you, hey, well, that guy was a broker. He wasn't our agent, so it's not our problem. Go get an attorney. Let them figure it out. Get one thing off your plate. Let somebody figure it out for you.
We've gone over a little bit here. I want to ask one more question for the audience here, and maybe we can wrap it up. Is what is the difference between, let's say, State Farm, which we know is an insurance company, and the California Fair Plan? Suppose that the California Fair Plan has acted dubious or something like that, or that they aren't paying out. How do you go after something like the California Fair Plan, and what is that?
Yeah, kind of big picture on California Fair Plan is that the state of California has required for what is it now, 50 years, that all insurance companies that sell insurance in the state of California participate in what they call the California Fair Plan, and that they underwrite the risk of the California Fair Plan according to their share, right? So if, say, Nationwide has 50% of the business in the state of California, then they own 50% of the risk in California Fair Plan. And California Fair Plan, as a lot of your neighbors know, Michael, is the insurer kind of last resort. State Farm pulls out, Nationwide pulls out, Farmers pulls out. You have to be able to get insurance. Your mortgage requires it. Just good sense requires it. And the Fair Plan is there to be kind of that insurance company of last resort. And it's also responsible, and the agents that it works through are responsible for standing behind the insurance product that they promised you they were selling you, and the insurance product they took your money to sell you, right? So Fair Plan doesn't get any special treatment. It doesn't get to walk away from its obligations. Kind of back end, there's some more complicated things about reinsurance and what happens, with the insurance company recovering its payments. But that's not, for you as the individual to worry about. If you're not being treated fairly by Fair Plan, get some legal help, get some help forcing Fair Plan to stand up and do what it's supposed to do.
Okay, 2 more questions here. Celine, you want to get those? You want me?
Yeah, I got it. So let's see. One person says the insurance broker error. Well, so the question is whether we handle insurance broker error type of cases or whether that would be someone else's area.
Or is that a separate lawsuit?
Yeah, so that's an area of law that we have experience with and that we can help you with. So yeah, you can definitely reach out to us, wildfire@cutterlaw.com or 888-825-3333, and we'll help you gather the information to figure out if that's a case that we can help you with.
And the other question is, I lost an investment property under my LLC. The insurance is under my personal name. I'm the only member in the LLC. Could the insurance company deny my claim?
That, again, like most all insurance policy questions, is we've got to take a look at the policy and see how it's written. How they define the insureds, if there are any additional insureds, and a bunch of really arcane, legal inside baseball questions. So if that's a situation that you're dealing with, feel free to reach out. Again, wildfire@cutterlaw.com, and we'll see if that's something that we can help you with.
I think because we've dealt with this actually in whistleblower cases where the LLC has more pass through for the member, as opposed if it would have been, say, an actual corporation like a C corp or S corp. So I think there is a little bit of leeway there for that person to answer that question. But reach out to John and Celine. Okay,
Next question says, does getting involved with a lawsuit against the government or quasi-government agency impact the delivery of insurance proceeds? Will insurance companies pay if the government is found guilty?
So your insurance company has a first obligation to you and to pay. Your insurance company doesn't get to say, well, we're going to wait and see how things shake out with anybody else. That's not the way that it works. The very first session that we did, Michael, with you and a fair number of folks, was about the timelines for insurance companies to pay. Insurance companies have present and ongoing obligation to pay you for your loss. Whether the insurance companies can also recover from the government, that's a separate question that doesn't relieve them of their responsibility to you. And if any insurance company or anybody from the insurance company is suggesting otherwise to you, 888-825-3333, I would love to file that lawsuit on your behalf.
Next question says, how do we determine what day our houses and cars burned to file a claim? Should that be the first day of the fire or when CAL FIRE determined the damage?
Let me explain this. So the fire occurred on January 7th, right, which is a Tuesday, and it spread. But a lot of people don't know if their house started burning at, say, when it got really bad again at night, like 11:30 or 2 in the morning or 4 in the morning or 10 in the morning. Some houses that on the 8th, which it would have been Wednesday, were still standing until later that day or the next day they were burnt down. So I guess, how do you narrow down the time? Well, what's the effective date? I've been told it's the day it started, which was January 7th, but maybe that's wrong.
Yeah, that's That's going to be the way that it works almost every single time, right? The day that the fire started is the date that is what you're generally going to work by. There are maybe some one-off circumstances here that you know that we're not talking about where that's not the case or that has an impact on you. Everybody else, the day the fire started is the day that you put down.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks for joining. I think that wraps up number 3. We will have a number 4 next week. If you guys have any suggestions or any needs or wants, special topics, you know, these Celine, John, Brooks, he's not here, Margot, they're experts. So we can provide you with that information. Here's information on how to reach out to them as well.
Yeah, and please do reach out. After each of these informational sessions, we've gotten a lot of emails, a lot of phone calls from people asking questions. It helps us figure out what information to share with you guys. Today, you know, we presented on FEMA and the debris removal process because of communication from people that have attended these sessions and let us know, hey, this is what's next for us, what's opt-in, what's FEMA, what's all this about. So please do reach out to us, wildfire@cutterlaw.com, and that helps us figure out how to help you.
Thank you for tuning in. For those who tune in live, as a neighbor said to me, there's nothing worse than a live webinar than a recorded live webinar. This is being recorded and will be posted, and you can watch it again, or you can get the word out and have people, you know, share the link. And so, John, Celine, thank you. For all those who attended, thank you. And hopefully we'll see you again next week.
Thanks a lot, Michael. I appreciate all the work that you go to make these happen.
Oh, the recording
Thank
will
you.
be on the Cutter Law website. We had one question about that. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a good evening.
everybody.